This is Reality Dispatch by Jim Minns.
He was disgruntled, there was no doubt about it, but he was always unhappy. He had often been accused of being in a state of permanent annoyance. He would admit to himself that this was true to a point, but his notoriety was built from it being a character trait, and it led to album sales. So who was he to question his nature if it meant a buck could be made? He had made peace with the fact that he was a character in a machine that spat them out for gain. He had lived as an artist his entire life, and there was once a time when he considered himself the quintessential artist. But he was older and wiser, and his music still flowed, and he was proud, and that was all that mattered. He was in Australia on tour, and his disgruntled nature sprung from a combination of jet lag and a mediocre set the night before. The band was off, and it wasn't a question of musical proficiency, tuning, or the room's ambience. Even the crowd was accepting of the performance. Something was just off. "Take me to Kiama," he told the cab driver, his Manchester accent emphasising the Kai. "That's a long trip, mate. You sure you don't want to catch the train?" the cabbie asked. "I'm sure," he said. "You're looking at around 300, maybe 400 bucks. The driver warned. He pulled out a wad of hundreds that added to 1,500 Australian dollars and handed them to the driver. "Yours if you get me there, wait for me, and bring me back." The driver kicked the car into gear and proceeded south from the CBD towards the coast. Noel reclined in the seat and let the summer air fill his lungs as he banged to dose. His dreams began from his earliest memories of Kiama. He had arrived there after a drunken night out many years ago. A tour of Australia that almost ended before it had began, the usual way, with excessive consumption. He had never left the UK before and was keen to explore. He was considered the sensible one, but something about the brightness of the sun below the equator was alluring in a way he had never been tempted before. He joined a crawl that had begun in the centre of King's Cross and proceeded further and further south, spanning many hours, 47 in total. When it had ended on the cliffside of the coast town of Kiama, he was beyond shit-faced, but he had never forgotten the sight of the heavy waves crashing against the solid cliffs. It was Armageddon personified. Many times he had travelled to Australian shores, and many times he had desired to return to the view, with a sober demeanour. Today was his chance. He awoke to a loud blaring horn as he noticed his driver had gone through a give-way sign. "Fuck's sake," he yelled. The driver apologised. The car proceeded down the cliffs towards the coast before traversing up again. The radio was on, a terrible Australian rock station. He knew it was terrible because it had already played 2 of his own songs. It was now on to the 3rd, and he had barely been in the car for 50 minutes. For a minute he thought the driver was listening to Spotify. "You taking the piss, mate?" he asked. He quickly realised it was not a setup when the ad break emerged. The song that played next was a late-blooming ballad by Pearl Jam. The song told the tale of a man swept up by the ocean and flung into the sky. Noel smiled to himself at the irony of seeking to capture that exact feeling when he was to arrive. He emerged from the cab and gave a secondary instruction to wait, and then proceeded up the grass slope towards the cliff face. It was more heavily fenced than he had remembered. It had been over 20 years. He sat and watched the crashes and absorbed the sounds. He closed his eyes and breathed in the fresh ocean air. He imagined himself being swept up by a giant tidal wave and flung into the air, given to fly. He wondered about that band and its ability to stay together and remain loyal to one another, to forgive and unite. He thought about his brother and wished he could have shared this moment with him. He was saddened by the knowledge that he was unable to call him, unable to reach out, unable to ask a simple question. It had been 15 years. He was an old man now. They both were. He pulled out his phone and dialed the international code. Then he put in the number he had remembered off by heart from many years ago, a distant memory of digits that used to flow from his fingers effortlessly. He sat and watched the crashes and listened to the dial tone clicks, the international receivers, and then finally the local mobile phone ringing. It rang once. It rang twice. It rang a third time. "Hello," said a voice on the other end. "Liam," said Noel.
For more stories of fact-based fiction, head to jimmins.substack.com.